My cousin Emma just sent me a text saying that if I don't sign over my share of our grandfather's inheritance, she's going to end her life, and her blood will be on my hands. It sounds like cheap drama, but knowing her, I know she's not joking. We haven't spoken in 3 years, and now I'm sitting on the floor of my empty apartment, looking at boxes of my belongings, wondering how my life turned into this absolute hell in just 1 week. It all started exactly 14 days ago. My grandfather, Arthur, passed away at the age of 84. He was the only person in our family who actually achieved anything through hard work, and his house in the Seattle suburbs is the only piece of real value that has ever belonged to our name. When the lawyer read the will, the silence in the room was so heavy you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Grandpa left the house to me and Emma in equal shares. 50-50. No strings attached. For me, this was a lifeline. I'm 32. My name is Mark, and this past year has been the worst of my life. I lost my job in logistics, buried myself in credit card debt, and my landlord literally showed me the door. This house was my only chance not to end up on the street. I planned to move in, get everything in order, and start my life over. But Emma had other plans. She called me that same evening. Her voice was cracked, and she was sobbing uncontrollably. Emma has been married to a guy named Jason for 5 years now. I never liked him. He's a slippery type who constantly jumped from job to job and liked to drink too much. But I didn't realize how bad things actually were. Emma said Jason lost a massive amount of money gambling, became aggressive, and she needed a place to hide. She claimed that Grandpa's house was her only path to safety. But there was a catch. She demanded that I completely renounce my share so she could sell the house, pay off her husband's debts, so he wouldn't come looking for her, and move to another state. I tried to explain to her that I have nowhere to live myself, that I was counting on this house. But she wouldn't even listen. She started screaming that I was selfish, that walls and a roof mattered more to me than her life. She reminded me how Grandpa always said we had to take care of each other. But does taking care mean I have to voluntarily become homeless just so she can bail out her worthless husband one more time? For the entire following week, my phone was blowing up with calls from relatives. My Aunt Linda, Emma's mother, called me 5 times a day. She didn't ask how I was coping with my job loss. She just kept repeating that I was a man and had to do the right thing. Mark, she's in a desperate situation. Don't you understand that Jason is dangerous? Do you want something to happen to your sister over a piece of land? Those words pressed down on me harder with every passing day. I drove to Grandpa's house just to sit there and think. When I pulled up, I saw Jason's car in the driveway. He was sitting inside, smoking. He wasn't supposed to be there. When he saw me, he didn't even get out. He just stared at me through the windshield with such pure hatred that I felt a chill down my spine. In that moment, I realized the situation was far more complicated than just splitting property. This wasn't just a dispute over money. It was the start of a war I was already losing before I even had a chance to fight back. The text from Emma wasn't the end of it. It was just the beginning of a coordinated psychological collapse. By the 3rd day of this mess, I realized that my family didn't see me as a person anymore. I was just an obstacle between them and a payout. I spent that night in the house, or what was left of it. Grandpa's scent, that mix of old tobacco and cedar, was still lingering in the hallways, but the atmosphere had shifted from peaceful to suffocating. Every floorboard creak felt like someone was watching me. I started digging through old files in Grandpa's desk, trying to find some peace, but instead, I found a series of letters from Emma's mother, Aunt Linda, dated from 6 months ago. She had been begging Grandpa for money for Emma's medical bills. But as I read through the vague descriptions, nothing added up. Emma wasn't sick. I remembered her Instagram posts from that time. She was on vacation in Cabo, looking perfectly fine. It hit me then. They had been trying to bleed Grandpa dry long before he died. He must have seen through it, which is why he split the house 50-50 instead of giving it all to the struggling niece. He knew I'd be the only one to actually keep the roof over my head. The next morning, Emma showed up at the front door. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed. But there was something calculated about her movements. She didn't ask to come in. She pushed past me. She sat at the kitchen table and laid out a stack of papers. They weren't just debt notices. They were lawsuits. Jason hadn't just lost money gambling. He had defrauded some very unpleasant people in a construction scam, and Emma's name was on the business license. "Mark, they know where I am," she whispered, her hands shaking as she lit a cigarette. "If I don't give them the full value of this house, they aren't going to go after Jason. They're coming for me. You have your health, you have your skills, you can find another job and a studio apartment. I'm looking at prison or worse." I looked at her and felt a flicker of pity, but then I looked at the papers. The total debt was almost exactly what the house was worth on the market. If I signed it over, she'd sell it, pay the criminals, and be left with zero. I asked her, "And then what, Emma? You pay them off and you're still broke, still with Jason, and I'm sleeping in my car. How does this solve anything?" She snapped. The victim persona vanished in a second. She told me that I was always Grandpa's favorite and that I had stolen enough attention from her during our childhood. She brought up stuff from 20 years ago, how I got a car for graduation and she didn't, how Grandpa paid for my community college. It was a laundry list of grievances she'd been nursing for decades. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about her finally winning something at my expense. As she was screaming, I noticed a black SUV parked at the end of the driveway. It didn't belong to anyone in the neighborhood. It just sat there idling. Emma saw me looking and turned pale. She didn't say another word, grabbed her papers, and practically ran to her car. She didn't go to the SUV. She drove in the opposite direction, and the SUV slowly began to follow her. I stood on the porch, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to help her, I really did, but I was looking at my own ruin. My bank account was at $42. My phone service was due to be cut off in 2 days. If I gave up this house, I wasn't just being a good guy. I was committing social suicide. I went back inside and locked every bolt on the door. I realized then that Emma wasn't just running from Jason or the debt. She was bringing that entire world to my doorstep. That night, I received a photo from an unknown number. It was a picture of the back of my head, taken through the kitchen window while I was making coffee an hour earlier. No text, just the image. They weren't just following Emma. They were marking me. I realized that my inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a target painted on my back, and my own family had supplied the paint. The photo of the back of my head sent a chill through my bones that I couldn't shake off. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with a heavy flashlight in my hand, watching the shadows stretch across the walls. At 3 a.m., my phone vibrated. It was a group chat titled Family Justice, created by Aunt Linda. It included me, Emma, and 3 other cousins I hadn't seen in years. The messages were a nonstop barrage of vitriol. They were calling me a house thief, a coward, and a traitor to Arthur's memory. By the next afternoon, the verbal abuse turned into physical intimidation. I was in the backyard trying to clear some overgrown brush when a truck pulled into the gravel driveway. It was Jason. He didn't look like a man in debt. He looked like a man looking for a fight. He hopped out of the truck, leaving the door open, and marched straight toward me. He was twice my size and smelled like cheap beer and desperation. "You think this is a game, Mark?" he barked, stopping just inches from my face. "Emma is crying herself to sleep every night because her own cousin wants to see her dead. Give us the papers. Sign the quitclaim deed, or I swear to God, I'll make sure you regret ever stepping foot in this town." I tried to keep my voice steady, though my hands were shaking behind my back. "Jason, the house is half mine. I have no money, no job, and nowhere else to go. If I give it to you, I'm on the street. Why is your gambling debt my responsibility?" He didn't argue. He just spat on my boots and looked around the yard. "Nice place," he muttered. "Shame if something happened to it." He walked back to his truck, but before he left, he leaned out the window and told me that Emma had already made arrangements with a buyer and that I was costing them $10,000 a day in delays. 2 hours later, the utilities went out. I checked the breaker box, nothing. I called the power company, and they told me the account had been closed by the co-owner. Emma had called them, pretending to be the sole decision-maker, and shut off the electricity. It was middle of October, and the house started getting cold fast. She was trying to freeze me out, literally. I went to the local police station to report the harassment and the photo I'd received, but the officer behind the desk just sighed. It's a civil matter, kid. Inheritances are messy. Unless he hits you or breaks a window, there's not much we can do. And that photo could be anyone. Change your curtains. When I got back to the house, it had been ransacked. Not by professional thieves, but by someone looking for something specific. My boxes were ripped open, my clothes were scattered across the floor, and Grandpa's old safe in the floor of the closet had been tampered with. They hadn't managed to open it, but the wood around it was splintered. I sat in the dark, wrapped in a blanket, eating cold beans from a can. My phone was at 4% battery. That's when I heard a soft tapping on the window. It wasn't Jason. It was Emma. She was standing outside in the rain, looking like a ghost. I opened the window just a crack. "Mark, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Jason is losing his mind. He thinks you have Grandpa's coin collection hidden here. He told the guys he owes money to that the coins would cover the interest. If they don't get them tonight, they're coming for both of us. Just give me the coins and the deed, and I'll tell them to leave you alone." I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see my cousin. I saw a stranger who was willing to feed me to the wolves to save herself. "There are no coins, Emma," I said. "Grandpa sold those years ago to pay for your wedding. Don't you remember?" The look on her face shifted from desperation to pure, unadulterated rage. "Then you've signed your own death warrant," she said, before turning and disappearing into the darkness. 10 minutes later, the black SUV from the day before pulled into the driveway. They didn't park at the end this time. They drove right up to the porch, and the high beams hit the house, illuminating the interior like a stage. Someone started pounding on the front door. Not a knock, but a heavy, rhythmic thud that sounded like a sledgehammer. My heart was thumping in my throat. I realized then that Emma hadn't come to warn me. She had come to confirm I was still there. The pounding on the door didn't stop. It was a rhythmic, soul-crushing sound that echoed through the empty hallways of the house. I was trapped in the kitchen, clutching a kitchen knife with slippery, sweaty palms. I hadn't turned on any lights, not that I could with the power cut, but the sweeping high beams from the SUV outside sliced through the blinds, creating strobe-like flashes of my grandfather's old furniture. Suddenly, the pounding stopped. Silence is always worse. I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel, moving toward the back of the house. A window shattered in the mudroom. I bolted toward the basement door, locking it behind me and sliding down the wooden stairs in total darkness. I huddled behind a stack of old tires, breathing through my teeth to stay quiet. I heard them inside. Heavy boots, muffled voices. "He's here somewhere," a man's voice growled. It wasn't Jason. It was deeper, colder. "Find the papers and find the kid. Jason said he wouldn't be a problem." Then I heard Emma's voice. She was inside too. "Just don't hurt him too much," she whispered, her voice shaking but not stopping them. "He just needs to sign. Once he signs, the house is legally mine, and we can close the sale tomorrow. The buyer is ready with the cash." My stomach turned. She wasn't just trying to pay off a debt. She had already sold the house out from under me. She had found a cash-for-houses shark who didn't care about the legal dispute as long as they got a signed deed. She was planning to forge my signature or force it, then disappear before the ink was dry. I reached into my pocket and felt Grandpa's old silver lighter. I flicked it, the tiny flame illuminating the corner of the basement. That's when I saw it. Taped to the bottom of an old workbench was a thick, manila envelope I hadn't noticed before. I pulled it down and ripped it open. It wasn't a coin collection. It wasn't money. It was a stack of legal documents and a handwritten note from Grandpa, dated just 2 weeks before he died. "Mark," it read, "I know they'll come for the house. I know what Jason is. I didn't leave you half a house to be a burden. I left it to you because the property is under a biological conservation easement I signed years ago. It can never be sold for development, and it can never be used as collateral for a loan. It's worth nothing to a bank. It's only worth something to someone who wants a home." I told Emma this, but she never listens. She only hears what she wants to hear. My heart stopped. Emma didn't know. She was out there risking my life and hers, bringing criminals into our family home for a payout that literally didn't exist. The cash buyer she found would run a title search the moment the deed was handed over and realize the land was virtually worthless on the open market. They would come back for her, and they wouldn't be looking for a signature next time. The basement door rattled. "Mark? You down there?" It was Jason now. He sounded manic. "Come out, man. We're all family here. Just sign the paper and we can all go get a drink. Don't make this weird." I looked at the window at the top of the basement wall, a small, rectangular opening meant for ventilation. I could squeeze through it. I had the documents. I had the truth. But as I grabbed the ledge to pull myself up, I heard a scream from upstairs. It was Emma. "What do you mean no?" she shrieked. "I mean the boss is tired of waiting," the deep voice replied. "If the kid doesn't have the coins and you don't have the deed, then we're taking the cars. And we're taking you." I froze. I could leave. I could crawl out that window, run to the neighbor's house, and let them deal with the mess they created. They had harassed me, hunted me, and tried to ruin me. If I stayed, I'd probably end up in a hospital or worse. If I left, Emma was at the mercy of the people she had brought into my house. I looked at the note in my hand. Grandpa's last words were about us taking care of each other. Even after everything, she was my sister. But then I heard the sound of a heavy blow and Emma hitting the floor. I dropped the lighter. The darkness swallowed me again. But the scream from upstairs acted like a physical jolt to my spine. I didn't crawl out the window. Maybe it was the shadow of the man my grandfather expected me to be, or maybe it was just the realization that if I ran, this nightmare would never actually end. I grabbed a heavy iron pry bar from the workbench and headed up the stairs. When I kicked the basement door open, the scene in the kitchen was worse than I'd imagined. Emma was on the floor, clutching her jaw, her face a mask of terror. Jason was backed into a corner, looking small and pathetic. Standing over them were two men I'd never seen. Professionals, the kind who don't raise their voices because they don't have to. The tall one was holding the deed Emma had tried to force me to sign. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice cracking but loud. They all turned. I held up the manila envelope. "The house is worthless. You want to hurt someone? Start with the guy who lied to you." I pointed the pry bar at Jason. The tall man frowned, his eyes scanning the conservation easement papers I tossed onto the table. I watched his face as he read the legal jargon. The clauses that turned $1 million suburban plot into a protected dead zone for developers. The silence was deafening. He looked at Emma, then at Jason, who was sweating so much his shirt was translucent. "You brought us out here for a property that can't be leveraged?" the man asked, his voice a low, dangerous hum. "He's lying." Jason scrambled forward. "It's a trick. He just wants to keep it for himself." The man didn't even look at Jason. He just backhanded him. A casual, brutal movement that sent Jason sprawling into the cabinets. He then looked at me. "You're the one with the brains, I see. Keep the house, kid. It's a cage anyway." He signaled to his partner. They didn't take the papers. They didn't take the deed. They just walked out the front door, got into the SUV, and drove away into the rain. The house fell into a sickening silence. Emma was still sobbing on the floor. Jason was moaning, his nose bleeding onto the linoleum. I stood there, still holding the pry bar, looking at the two people who had spent the last month trying to destroy my life. "Get out," I said. My voice was flat. No anger, just a bone-deep exhaustion. "Mark, please," Emma gasped, looking up at me. "They'll come back for us. We have nowhere to go. Jason owes them so much." "I don't care," I said. "You brought them to Grandpa's house. You turned his memory into a bait shop. Get out or I'm calling the police, and I'll make sure they see every bruise on your face and tell them exactly how Jason got them." It took them an hour to pack their things and leave. As Jason's truck pulled out of the driveway, I watched the red taillights vanish into the fog. I was alone in a cold, dark house that was worth nothing to the world, but it was mine. It's been a month since that night. I'm still here. I managed to get the power back on after paying a massive deposit. I found a job at a local hardware store. It's not much, but it's a start. My family doesn't speak to me. Aunt Linda told everyone I tricked Emma and left her to be beaten by thugs. They've completely rewritten the story to make me the villain who kept a worthless house out of spite. Sometimes I sit on the porch at night and look at the land. I realize now that Grandpa didn't just leave me a house. He left me a filter. This house filtered out every person in my life who valued a paycheck over blood. Cost me my family, my reputation, and my peace of mind. But as I look at the dark trees of the conservation zone, I realize I've never felt lighter. They say blood is thicker than water, but they forget that you can drown in both. I'm 32 years old. I have $42 in my pocket and a roof that leaks when it rains. And for the first time in my life, I'm not running from anyone. The house is quiet now. Sometimes it's a bit too quiet.